What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of working on the $500 E36. In today's episode, we're hopefully going to finish everything with the manual swap and doing the rear main seal. All we really have left is swapping out the manual pedal assembly, bolting up the clutch and flywheel, along with the master and slave cylinder for the clutch, and bolting the trans in and the drive shaft, and then we're all good. First things first, we're gonna just go ahead and get started on the rear main seal. There are two 13mm bolts, 4 10 mils up top, and then 2 10s down here. So we're just gonna remove all those, and then we'll be able to remove this plate here that is holding the seal. I may have forgotten to drain the oil, so doing that right now real quick. With this all clean, we're gonna go ahead and put a thin layer of silicone at the bottom here. And start smacking in the new seal into this housing here. I'm just gonna line it up with my hands, place the old seal over it, put a piece of wood over that, and smack it down with the hammer. All right, so our goal here is to get everything nice and flush around here. Okay, we're just gonna put this thing on here real quick.
That doesn't mean your buddy's building something super cheap or whatever. That's just finding a crate motor that's gonna make that.
Okay.
Maybe from Texas Speed or something.
Now that we got that on there, we're gonna grab our 13 mil bolts, thread these in really quick. Now our 4 10s up top.
My circle trap car, I think we had 4 engines die out once. Or, I mean, you are giving. Number 1 pharmacist recommended vitamin supplement brand.
Then we're all torqued down. Pull that plastic piece out. And there we have it. Fresh rear main, all installed, and hopefully won't leak. Now that we got that installed, I think we're gonna go ahead and head on over inside of the car, removing the automatic brake pedal and installing the manual pedal assembly. Before I do that, actually, I think I gotta go run over to the hardware store and get a couple longer bolts for the master cylinder. So our master cylinder bolts onto the pedal assembly bracket thing, whatever you want to call it, like this. And I'm using a different master than the one that came on the car originally, which was this one right here with the kind of longer neck right here. And on this, it's a little bit skinnier than this one. So the OEM bolts aren't long enough to go through. And the reason why I switched to this master is because we got this clutch line off of Beamer World on their website. I don't really know the reasoning behind this, but they said to use this shorter master for whatever reason. So I wanted to be safe and make sure I got the part they were telling me to get to run this clutch line. And the reason why we're running this clutch line rather than the OEM hard line that comes off of the master and then to the soft line on the slave is because since this is an auto car, there's no bracket down there where the hard line would attach normally. So this eliminates the need for all that, and it's just a lot more simple. So we're using this, and then it comes with this little tab that we could self-tap onto the trans tunnel to keep this out of the way. So I'm gonna go run over to the parts store and grab a couple longer bolts. That way we could assemble our manual pedals. Okay, so we're back from the parts store. Here is the longer bolts we picked up. So yeah, just a little bit longer than the old ones. And so what we're gonna do now is bolt up the master cylinder to the bracket. Okay, so we need this bracket to go right here, which has a nut on the end of it that this longer bolt's gonna thread onto. So we just put our master on, going up top. And then with our shorter bolt, we have this little nut that fits into a channel down here, right in there. And then that bolt threads in. Okay, so now that we got our master cylinder bolted in, and you gotta make sure too that the clutch, if I could show that, clutch is behind the switch. So it presses it right there. Now we're gonna install the spring. Goes on the back of this, and then we gotta put in this part where this top piece that goes on top of the spring fits into, like that, and allows it to pivot back and forth. You need to get the little rod in here to clear down in there. It's the biggest thing, so you gotta kind of like put pressure on it as you're pushing it down. And then it gets to a certain point, like right about any second now, where it's gonna just click into place like that. Okay, now we're gonna connect our master cylinder through the pedal right there with this pin that goes through, and then this clip on the one end. So the clip side is going to be the outer part of it, pushing on it. So I can slide this clip over the other side like that. Now this should be able to pivot back and forth like that without falling out. Okay. So that's how it looks. Okay, so under here, there's 4 nuts that need to come off, holding the brake assembly onto the firewall. 4 up here, and then 1 up here, and then you also need to disconnect the brake switch. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and take all these nuts off and the one bolt up top. This is gonna be really hard to do while holding the camera, so I'm probably just gonna take all those off camera. Oh yeah, and then also the clip on the side needs to come off as well. All right, so after I took the clip off of this side, you have to slide this out. It's like a pin that goes through. I can't line it up right now, but you get the idea. I just pulled this out after taking that clip out, and now the brake pedal is off of the brake master. So now I've already removed that bolt up top. All we gotta do is take out these four, and we should be able to just slide this out. So all the bolts are off. I'm just gonna wiggle this shit off of here. Hopefully. We'll see. Okay. There we go.
Oh, wow.
Out with the auto pedal. You take that. Throw it in the trash. Okay, now also under here, we've got to get this stuff out of the way so that way we can feed our lines for the feed and the clutch line through these holes. You just rip that off and then poke through here. There's little rubber pieces covering the holes, so we're just gonna poke through that. I don't know what this is. Something, some sort of plug. Okay, we'll just push that out. And same up here. Just push that out. And then we could go in the engine bay and pull that stuff out. Alright, so we got the clutch line fed through the hole right here. Now we just gotta throw in the manual pedals and feed this feed line through that top hole right there. Okay, so we've officially got the manual pedal assembly in. I throw on these nuts, the four in the back, and then the one bolt up top here. And then we just gotta put this rod through the fork there for the master, through the brake, and then put this spring back on. It goes on the back of that little pin that I just showed you, and then the other part goes up here. I'll show you when it's done. Our car officially has 3 pedals. We got it all bolted up. Got this pin on there, and you have to just make sure to align the back part up with the brake switch like that. Sorry, it's kind of hard to show. And then you also hook up that spring. Goes right there. We also bolted up the clutch line into the master, and we fed the feed line up to the top hole, but the pedals are in, so we're all good there. Probably go ahead and install this short shifter really quick. I need a friend up top to thread these in while I go on the bottom, and hold this bottom plate on there. Yeah, we're going with a chassis mount short shifter. Might as well, since we got the trans out and we're doing all this, because I hate the stock shifter. It's just a preference thing, to each their own. I mean, I hear a lot of guys that prefer stock shifters, but I don't have any issues with these. I think they work a lot better, so gonna install that. And if you are doing a chassis mount shifter on your car, you want to upgrade your motor mounts and trans bushings. That way there's less play through the drivetrain, because this is bolted directly to your trans tonal. So yeah, gonna go ahead and bolt that in really quick, and then we can start working on installing the clutch and flywheel. I'm underneath the car, and I got this bottom plate, and I have Dan up there. He's gonna tighten all the bolts as I hold this plate in place. Easy peasy. Bop, 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 bop. We got our new shifter all tightened down and installed. We got our 3 pedals. We're looking good. Okay, so here's the clutch kit I went with. It's made by this company, Valio. I don't know how you say it, but it's a single mass flywheel conversion. It came with the clutch, the flywheel, the pressure plate, the throwout bearing, and the flywheel bolts. I think it was, I don't exactly remember how much it cost. I think it was like a couple $100 or something like that. Maybe like between $200 to $400 maybe. I got it off of Rock Auto, and it was super cheap on there. I don't know how well it's gonna handle clutch kicks and drifting, but it's all right. We'll figure it out. So before we install it, I'm gonna go ahead and just spray it down with some brake clean and wipe it down, clean all this grease off of the surface. We sprayed and wiped down the flywheel, so now I'm just gonna crawl under the car really quick. Gonna kind of spray and clean all the oil off the backside of the engine before we go ahead and bolt everything up. Okay, I wiped it down a little bit. I took this shield off and sprayed it with some brake clean and wiped it. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit cleaner than it was. So now we're gonna go ahead and get to throwing on the flywheel. Okay, so when I went to go ahead and install the pilot bearing, before I went and smacked it in, I wanted to verify that it fit on the input shaft, which I don't know if you can see that, but it does not go on at all, like not even close. So I thought maybe, you know, this was damaged or something like that. I don't know. Maybe like got swollen or something somehow, but it's so far off that like I figured that is not the case. Now I did verify that this part that I ordered was for a 95 325, which this car is a 95 325, and this trans came off of a 95 325. So same year trans, and yeah, it just won't fit. It's way too small. So I went to the parts store, and luckily they had one on the shelf, and I compared it to this one that I got online, and it was the same thing. It was the same exact size. So I was super confused by that, and I told the worker that the problem I'm having is this hole, the inner diameter of the bearing, is too small for the input shaft on the trans. He luckily was able to find another part that said it did not fit my vehicle, and as you could tell, the inner diameter is way bigger. They're the same outside diameter, but yeah, I don't know exactly what car this was for, but when I came home, to test it, it goes right on. I mean, it's really tight, which it's supposed to be, but it fits. So I thought that was really weird. What I also thought was weird was the clutch alignment tool is the same diameter as this smaller bearing. So I don't know what is going on here. I'm super thrown off by this, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is before you go and smack your pilot bearing into the engine, verify first that this fits over your input shaft of your trans, or else you're gonna have a huge headache trying to take this one out and then replace it with the right one. So just double check that. But yeah, now I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the surface on this input shaft just with some Scotch-Brite. Just gonna kind of, clean it off a little bit. I don't want to score it or anything, but just kind of clean the surface off that way, and then grease this up, of course, before we slide it in. But I just want to make sure that it's going to go on nice and smooth. So I cleaned it up with the Scotch-Brite, just kind of lightly going around and wiping it clean. And so now, and I mean, there's no grease on this thing or anything yet, but it should just slide right on. There we go. That's what we want. And there's no play in it or anything. It fits as it should. Okay, so it greased up the spot where the bearing's gonna go. So now I'm just gonna kind of line it up, make sure it's on there evenly. And then I found that this 7/8 socket fits perfect. It's just a little bit smaller than the bearing itself, but it makes contact with the outer ring. So I'm gonna be able to hold this right here and then smack it in with a hammer. We're just gently tapping this thing in little by little and make sure we're getting it in there as even as possible. We should be good right there. That's how it should look like. It goes in pretty deep, and you just want it to go all the way against that lip on the inside. Now we are going to go ahead and get our flywheel up on here. We got to make sure that we line this little dowel up on the back of the flywheel. You'll see that one of the holes will have a little spot for the dowel. I don't know if you can see that, but this one here is a little bit bigger. So we're going to make sure that we line that one up right there. Once we get it on there, we'll go ahead and thread one of the flywheel bolts to hold it into place. But the dowel is there, so that should help us kind of keep it in that spot. Push my starter out of the way so I can get this thing on here. Okay, now that it's seated on here, just gonna throw these flywheel bolts in. Okay, now I'm gonna grab my 19, which I should have brought under here with me. Snug all these down real quick. Okay, so all of these are snugged down now. So we're gonna want to torque them down to, I believe it's 89 foot-pounds. However, I'm gonna need to figure out a way to keep the flywheel from spinning as I'm torquing them down. All right, there's one. It's a lot easier to hold the pry bar with her left hand on this side. There's 2, 3, 4. Ow. That hurt. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's all of them. I should be smart about it and go through and check them all just to be safe. I've already gone in the star pattern. I'm just gonna go ahead around in a circle and verify that they're all torqued. That was a huge pain in the ass. So now that we got that done, I'm gonna go ahead and just spray down the flywheel again with some brake clean, wipe it down, make sure it's all nice and clean before we go ahead and put the clutch and the pressure plate on. Okay, so we got our flywheel all cleaned off. There's no more machine oil or any grease. Same with the pressure plate. That's all nice and clean. So now we're going to go ahead and fit our clutch and pressure plate on. It is very important that you make sure when you're putting your clutch disc on, you're putting it in the right orientation. If you put it in backwards, it's not going to sit up against the flywheel flush. Easiest way to check to make sure you're putting it on the right way is see that it sits flush against the flywheel and it's not sticking out. As long as it's making contact and it's spinning freely like that, you should be all good. Okay, so now with our clutch in here, we're just gonna grab our pressure plate, and there's 3 little dowels that will hold it into place. And you gotta make sure that you don't mistake those dowel holes for the actual holes where you're going to be putting the bolt through. Okay, so I kind of just pressed it into place. As long as the clutch is free to move around in here, you know you're on it properly. So yeah, we're good there. Now this should stay in place while we grab our bolts for the pressure plate. On my kit, they're 6mm Allen key. You don't necessarily need one of these, but it does make your life a lot easier. You just go ahead and shove it through, and that's how you're able to line it up. However, as I showed you earlier, my pilot bearing is a little bit bigger than this part here, so I don't know what's really going to be aligned, but I mean, I'm sure it's going to be close enough just by sticking it through and making sure it goes all the way down. And then I'm just going to look at it and verify. It looks pretty centered to me, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave it in there while I snug down all these bolts. Okay, now that we got the clutch and flywheel and pressure plate installed, we're gonna work on prepping the trans before we put it in. So we gotta pull out this old throwout bearing, take off this clutch fork and the old pivot ball. As you can see, that's completely gone. So yeah, we're replacing it with this brass pivot bushing. It's completely worn out and it's plastic, so this one won't get worn out like this one. And for this one, it came out of this hole super easy. On the back side of the trans, you could stick something in there like a screwdriver or something and hit it out. But in my case, I didn't even have to hit it out. I just stuck a Allen key through it and it came out super easy. We're gonna grease up the clutch fork on these two parts where it touches the slave and the pivot bushing. And then we're gonna take this spring, we're just gonna reuse it. I didn't order a new one. So I'm gonna take this spring off and throw it on our new pivot bushing. Dab up this thing too, the clutch fork. That should be good. I'm gonna grab a 13 deep socket, put it over it like that, and then hit this end with a hammer. We're gonna take our clutch fork, put it back in here. Slip the clip back over it. Okay. Just like that. And then we'll grab our new throwout bearing. We'll put some grease on it. Okay, I just greased up the inside, and then on these two pieces here, we're gonna line up like with these 2 points, so like right in the center. Okay, so it just slides right in, and as long as everything's moving pretty smoothly like that, we should be all good. Okay, now we're just gonna Scotch Brite the mating surface real quick. Clean it up a little bit. Yeah, that should be good. Doesn't need to be perfect, it just ideally you want it to be clean and smooth. So we got all this stuff on. We're gonna lube up the input shaft a little bit on the spindle part so that way it slides into the clutch easy. The clutch kit came with a little bit of grease here, so we're just gonna go ahead and use that. Okay, it should be all good. I'm gonna go under the car and get this thing bolted up, but first we'll jack up the engine at the front and get it kind of tilted so that way we could get this thing bolted up easier. As we're trying to line it up, we're gonna spin the output shaft to get the splines on the input shaft to line up with the splines on the clutch. Obviously, it's recommended that you use a jack, but we're just stupid. Yeah, we're gonna try to just pick it up and throw it in there. So, all right. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. Hold on. I like this angle.
Oh.
Okay. I think we made some progress. Get the jack under it better. And go up with it slightly. Okay, stop right there. Okay, so I was twisting this and holding it up and also putting pressure on it this way. So I'm gonna scoot closer under here to see how far off we are. We just got done snugging up all of the, what is this, E14 bolts. Now we're gonna move on and snug down the smaller ones, which is gonna be the E10. Everything's looking good. Thing is completely flush up against the block. So I'm just gonna finish tightening down all of the bell housing bolts, and then we'll install those last two starter bolts. Okay, all the bell housing bolts are tight. Just had to throw in these last two bolts for the starter, and then we could bolt up the cross member, and the male trans will officially be in. Oh, and also we'll plumb the clutch line. I already bolted the slave cylinder onto the trans out of the car just to make sure it was all lined up properly before we got it onto here. Okay, starter is in place. We got the bolts for the starter all tight, so we should be good to go. I'm gonna try threading in the clutch line into the slave cylinder. Shift it, turn it through there first, and then it's over here. There we go. Then put the clips back in. Like that. And there we have it. The car is manual. All we have to do is bleed the clutch and connect the drive shaft, and we're all good. How's it feel?
Mint.
She's manual. Finally. Gears feel smooth. Everything feels good. I still got a few little things to do, like bleeding the clutch, connecting the drive shaft, eventually having to wire the clutch neutral safety switch, or taking a chip out of the ECU, something for the auto computer or something like that. I don't know. I got to do a little bit of research on that and figure out what we got to do to make sure this thing is going to start. But other than that, most of the hard stuff is out of the way, so should be pretty smooth sailing from here. I'm going to stop the video now because we've already covered a bunch of stuff and this video is going to be super long, so I appreciate you for watching. Stay tuned for the last few things we're going to do on this car. Next episode will probably be just wrapping up the last of the manual swap stuff. New radiator in, putting new oil in, new coolant, bleeding the system. And then we'll finally get to installing the fun parts like the coilovers, the angle kit, and things like that. So yeah, until next time, peace.